Okay, so I thought I was done talking about ULEZ. However, there is a reason yet again to talk about ULEZ. What am I referring to? Why has ULEZ popped back into the news? And what does it all mean? Well, I'll tell you everything right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Right, so obviously we are now in election mania. We have less than a month to go between now and the election that happens here in the UK. And we've been having debates between the main leaders. And then I think the night before, last night, there was the multi-party debate on the BBC. And of course, recently we also had, just in the last few days, we had D-Day. And then there was a whole controversy about Prime Minister Rishi Sunak coming home early from D-Day and getting a lot of criticism for that. And this was brought up in the debate as well yesterday. So this morning, obviously, in typical spin style of electioneering, the idea is to then find a distraction, to find a way to change the route of the conversation, to change the direction of the conversation, to bring something else into it. And both parties are out, they're making various claims, as they always do, making various promises. But what really caught my attention and made me wince, I suppose, was the Conservative trying to jump back onto the so-called ULEZ bandwagon, which, to be honest with you, as far as I was concerned, I thought that was well and truly parked. ULEZ, Ultra Low Emission Zone in London, expanded at the end of September, at the end of September last year in 2023. By Mayor of London, Sadiq, who is a Labour mayor. And the only thing that we had hoped was that if we were able to change him in the mayor elections, which happened just over a month ago, actually, here in London in May, then the leading opponents had promised that they would reverse it. Of course, that didn't happen. We didn't even get close to challenging him. He completely walked it. He was put back into the role of mayor, and of course that pretty much kind of validated his decision to expand it. And of course, as I've said many times in other videos, it basically gives him carte blanche to impose further restrictions. And it's inevitable that when Labour comes in, then he will be given even more authority and even more power to wield the axe on the hopes and dreams and aspirations of motorists everywhere, particularly in London, but I do mean everywhere in the UK, because what happens in London will be expanded to other places. The Labour deputy leader, Angela Rayner, had already said this over a year ago, that the ULEZ experiment in London would be expanded to other cities. This would be her desire. So, done and dusted. We lost that fight. We didn't even send a message. ULEZ has happened. ULEZ is here to stay, and it's very likely that it's going to expand. So yet now, it comes back into the conversation again. So why does it come back into the conversation again? Tories vow, I'm reading from the Evening Standard, Tories vow to reverse the ULEZ expansion if they win the general election. The Prime Minister has argued the Conservatives are on the side of drivers, claiming Labour has launched a war on drivers in London. Well, he's right about the second part of that. There is a war on motorists, and it is driven by many parties, and some would argue even to an extent by the Conservative Party, because there are some aspects of what has happened over the last few years that has impacted motorists in terms of rising fuel costs, increasing congestion charge costs, rising insurance, restrictions on the use of cars and vehicles, but also the introduction of Euro emission standards, and of course the fact that then that leads to ULEZ, which makes lots of people's cars redundant because they can't use them in certain areas because of requirements such as ULEZ, such as low emission zones, such as CAZ, clean air zones, etc., etc. So the reality is that whilst they're now saying that, and they did issue, to be honest, they did issue a document, and I covered that in a previous video, and I think I'll put the link above and below on this video, where I did cover their motoring manifesto. in which they made lots of claims. And this was back when, probably I was a little bit more hopeful. Perhaps I'm a little bit more cynical now. And it looked like, at least they acknowledge that there's a war on the motorists, and at least that they are saying that they would tackle it. But I mean, I'm actually quite flabbergasted that they've even brought this up. I mean, talking about trying to create a distraction, trying to change the direction of the conversation. I mean, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has promised to push through a backing drivers bill, that's inverted commas, backing drivers bill, in the first parliamentary session after the July the 4th election, which would also stop pay-per-mile road taxes and rule out blanket low traffic neighbourhoods. So they're basically touching on all the keywords, on all the key points of motorist concern in the UK. This is like, desperately like, oh, well, we're doing so badly. Let's try and hone in on those emotions again, on the motorists, and say, yeah, but we're your friend, and we'll make sure we get rid of the LTNs and the 20 miles per hour limits, and ULEZ will be rolled back, and I mean, look. To go on, Mr. Sunak has said that Conservatives are the party on the side of the drivers, claiming that Labour has launched a war on drivers in London, announcing the plans for the bill. We have a clear plan to keep motoring costs under control, ensure people have the freedom to drive as they need to lead their daily lives. We will empower drivers and local residents to challenge aggressive and punitive traffic-inducing measures like low traffic neighbourhoods that were imposed without local consent. And that's the clear choice in this election between Labour, who have launched a war on drivers in London and Wales, and our clear plan to give drivers the freedom they need to build a secure future for themselves and their children. Wow, that expanded rapidly, didn't it? That escalated quickly there. So just to break that down, we will empower drivers and local residents to challenge aggressive and punitive traffic-inducing measures. Well, don't forget that, this is a democracy, and as citizens, you have the right to do that anyway. You don't need the government to say we will empower you to challenge aggressive, punitive traffic inducing measures. No, you can do that anyway, regardless of whoever is in government. So, don't be distracted by that. And then there's a clear choice in this election between Labour, who have launched a war on drivers in London and Wales. Yes, because like I said, the London mayor is Labour, and also in Wales, the governing body in Wales is Labour. And of course, Wales then also introduced a lower speed limits, which now they have kind of had to reverse on and to go back on. Although they haven't yet set the plan for actually changing things back, because they haven't found the budget to change all the signs and everything back to 30 where people want them. So it's crazy, right? And then this whole thing about the freedom they need to build a secure future for themselves and their children. Well, I think, I think that this is a general election. You have to consider a lot of things, and the cost of living crisis, housing, jobs, economy, a lot of things have to be considered. I'm never going to tell you who to vote for, which party to vote for, but these are all things you've got to consider. Motoring is part of that, but it's a little bit of a jump to do that. Although, as a car guy, I'll always argue that yes, cars are an important part of human civilization, of human progression, of the ability for us to go about our lives and our businesses and our leisure, and to improve situations for us and our families. So I would always say that, but in the bigger picture thinking, you got to look at it another way. The Mayor of London, Sadiq, expanded ULEZ to cover all of Greater London in August 2023. So it was the end of August 2023, beginning of September. But the Tories have claimed this means thousands of people can now no longer afford to get to hospital appointments or where they work or study. I mean, this is stuff. I mean, again, if you go on to browncarguy.com, it's the article, the dossier article is no longer linked or pinned to the top of the page as it was before, but you'll still find, if you just search ULEZ on Brown Car Guy, then you will find my actually 2 pages of dossier of all the stuff, all the content that I've done. This stuff about hospital appointments, people's work, and etc. being caused a problem for them to be able to get around and do their work and do their businesses. I have extensively covered this in tons and tons and tons of content, including many interviews with people that were directly affected by this. So all of that is a given. We know that. Mr. Khan insisted. Now, this is Mayor Khan. Mr. Khan insisted he is not anti-motorist and has ruled out making any further changes to ULEZ. By the way, he did rule out making any further changes to ULEZ the last time he won the election. So when he won it the second time, he had said at the time that there was no plan to expand it. He would not expand it. Instead, he would be tackling particular hotspots, which at the time to me made sense. But of course, then he changed his mind on that. So, none of these politicians can be trusted. And Mr. Khan said, I'm well aware that the Conservatives tried to portray me during the mayoral election campaign as being anti-motorist, and that was a theory and a thesis rejected by Londoners on May the 2nd. I don't think it necessarily was rejected by Londoners. You are anti-motorist as far as we can tell. But you know what? Hey, Sadiq, listen, if you're listening to this, look at this. I'll just read the next bit as well. I'm not anti-motorist. This is Sadiq Khan saying this. I'm not anti-motorist. I'm in favor of cars driving where they can at 20 miles per hour rather than 30. Why? Because you're 5 times more likely to kill somebody and cause them serious injury if you're driving at 30 rather than 20. You're far more likely to kill somebody at 20 if they're in front of you. Why the hell are people walking around in the middle of a 30 miles per hour road? I mean, there's many aspects to this. I know some people watching this are going to jump on me for saying that, but I've covered this in other things. You know, there's things such as improved training for pedestrians. Remember the Green Cross Code. You're not supposed to be walking across. You're not supposed to be looking at your phone and walking across the road. You know, there's culpability on all sides in these things sometimes. You know, but the reality is that some roads, okay, if you talk about 20 miles per hour in high streets or outside schools or outside health services, it makes sense. When you're talking about 20 miles per hour limits on a 3-lane dual carriageway in front of Finchley Road on the A41, sorry, that makes no sense. There should not be any pedestrians on that apart from the clearly demarcated pedestrian crossing zones. So that's a complete and utter nonsense. But as I was saying, Sadiq, if you're listening to this, listen, mate, you're not anti-motorist. This is what you're saying. I am happy to sit down with you if you want to have that conversation, and if you want to convince me or try to convince me that you genuinely aren't anti-motorist, because as far as I'm concerned and as far as a lot of people are concerned, that not only you but the entire Labour Party is comprehensively anti-motorist, anti-driver, and anti our ability to enjoy our cars. And I fear absolutely that car enjoyment, car culture, and to an extent the car industry will be hit and will suffer extremely badly over the next 5 years or so, when Labour of course comes in to power on July the 5th, which is virtually inevitable. The Conservatives have argued that unnecessary restrictions to drivers have made travel harder for people and curbed their freedoms. The party claimed local Labour politicians are exploring pay-per-mile road taxes, which could charge drivers, depending on how far they drive, what time of day and what car they use. The Tories have said that they are committed to investing 8.3 billion of funds redirected from HS2 to repair roads, fix potholes, including an extra 235 million pounds on London roads. Mark Harper, Transport Secretary, said, "We will continue to build on our clear plan for drivers and make sure they are supported in the face of Labour politicians desperate to tax them off the roads. We will reverse Sadiq Khan's unfair ULEZ expansion and rule out blanket 20 mile per hour zones because we are on the driver's side. We will rule out any other pay-per-mile road tax to keep costs of drivers down." As a clear choice for this election, Labour will continue to penalise drivers, or the Conservatives who will back drivers. Now, listen, about the potholes. I just recently came back, well, not recently, yesterday came back from Portugal, where I went there. I went over there overnight. I was invited by Nissan to the media press launch of the Nissan Qashqai, and we did a lot of driving. The first day was about 2.5 hours, and the second day was an hour and a half of driving. A lot of that was through quite remote villages and B roads and on mountain roads, etc., etc. And I tell you what, we were desperately looking for potholes. We had to look for them. And literally, like, I think on the way back yesterday, my fellow driver who was driving the car at the time said, "Look, what a pothole! I'm going to drive into it just for the sake of, oh my God, we found a pothole. Let's see how the car behaves over a pothole." That's how smooth the roads were in Portugal. And I'm talking in remote areas, and of course the city was pristine. So Portugal, and then we came back here, and literally I'm driving my non-ULEZ compliant BMW E30, which I'm sitting in now, which is one of the things why I'm so pissed off about ULEZ, is because I have to pay every time I take this out. I took this to the airport a day before. I had to leave it there overnight, come back. So to go and do this press trip, I've had to pay 2 lots of ULEZ to do that. And then of course I've had to dodge all the potholes on the way back so as to make sure that I am not overstraining the suspension on this car and risking damaging the BBS alloys on this car, which is very, very hard to replace. So the thing about the Tories now saying all of these things is that we will reverse ULEZ and we will stop the blanket 20 miles per hour limit and we will stop the LTNs. I'm sorry, but if you could have done that, why didn't you already do that? I mean, this is unacceptable for you to be saying now. It's almost like rubbing salt into our wounds. It's like, oh yeah, you could have reversed ULEZ, you could have stopped you. Well, why didn't you? It's a bit late now. Or were you literally like, oh, let ULEZ go ahead and then we'll just use that as an election promise? I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, this is not inspiring me. This is not filling me with hope, and this is not me, not making me want to, not influencing my decision on how I might vote. This is just pissing me off, honestly. That now you're making these claims. Now you're saying these things. You know, now that we've had ULEZ, now that ULEZ has virtually embedded itself into our culture, and it's like, you know, feels like there is no going back. Now you're telling us this. Yes, I agree that things are going to get a lot worse for motorists under the Labour government. I agree with that. But you haven't covered yourself in previous automotive glory to be able to now make these claims and promises that you're actually going to make things better if we elect you back in again. So I think this is an absolute travesty, honestly, to be honest, to even come back onto this subject and onto the discussion regarding this. I think it's an absolute joke, and I'm actually quite annoyed, to be honest with you, that this has even come up. Because if it was that case, if it was really as simple as saying, oh, we'll push a driver backing bill through Parliament that will erase all of this and will create motoring nirvana for motorists and car people all over the country, then why didn't you already do that? I'm sorry, it's just not acceptable. But anyway, I look forward to hearing what you guys think about this, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Are you enjoying the video? Well, make sure you've punched the like button. It helps. Oh, and by the way, I should just say, I've also just put up another podcast video with a good buddy of mine, Massimo Pini. We were chatting. We were driving a car in Portugal, the Nissan Qashqai in Portugal, and we were just chatting about various motoring issues, and we got into a deep discussion. I thought this is really good stuff. So I put the camera on and I recorded the discussion that we had. And basically we were talking about the advent of in-car subscription services, which means that you could own if it's impossible in my car, in this car. But for example, if I'm driving this car, I own this car, but if I want to turn the radio on, if I want to use the radio, I'd have to pay a subscription, even though it's there, but I'd have to pay BMW in order to use that. So in a modern context, say you wanted to use the heated seats. So, you know, you'd have to pay a subscription and say, I want to use the heated seats. And that's what it would be. So we discussed that, and we discussed how that relates to also things like road user charging, things like pay per mile, and we also touched on ULEZ as well. So if you enjoyed this conversation, you will definitely enjoy that conversation. Go check it out. I just posted that before this one, so you'll be able to find it easily. Anyway, lots to discuss, I'm sure. Probably a lot more going to come out. In fact, I think I'm going to do another video, so stay tuned. I'll try to find out what the parties are saying about motoring, and maybe I'll try and put that all into one video. Anyway, I'll try and do the best I can in order to keep you guys informed. Check this out, guys. It's my book. It's my first novel, and it's written for car fans like you. It's a fun political action thriller. It's full of cool cars and spectacular action. Get your copy now at Amazon.com. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links, or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.